And
Yes, we are live here on Donald Kent Art and on PatriArts. We are doing the Patriotic Art live show today. Paul, how are you today? What's going on?
I'm doing well. It's good to have you back. Missed you past. Has it been a week or two? 2 weeks? I think
I
past
think
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah, I got a
Yeah,
lot on my plate right now, going through a lot of stuff. So
yeah,
just
yeah.
trying to get back on track with my life and my content and all of that good stuff. We have a
Uh-huh.
really interesting show today, so I'm very excited to get into it with you, and very
Yeah,
happy to have everybody in the audience joining us as well. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff.
yeah. Brilliant. So this was a hot topic. We didn't actually do a. I didn't actually put out a secondary poll last week because this kind of came joint near enough, maybe like one vote in it, and I already started doing some notes and things. So I
Hmm.
thought, it's a good topic to cover, and I really wanted to
Yeah.
just do something on it. So yeah, here we are, the white man's burden, and
Mm.
we are, I guess, going to go through some voiceovers still. What's one thing I did last week? I don't know if you managed to see the last week's show, but they got some AI voiceovers to do some points,
Very
so we can
cool.
focus on drawing.
Excellent. I've
And
uh,
yeah,
I've been I've been thinking a lot about how we can utilize AI just in our movements and for business and all kinds of things. So I think that's very
uh-huh.
clever. It's very clever of you. I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah, may as well, let it work for you. So Donald's storming ahead with his question now. Maybe you just want to discuss this idea, and then we'll play the first segment of sort of historical narrative, where we'll be kind of exploring
Hmm.
the themes of white man's burden.
Yeah. So I think it's understood as essentially the consequence or the maybe even the baggage that comes from exploration, development, and what they call colonialism of other continents in the world, and how there's a certain consequence of dealing with people on those continents and all the rest of it. So how I view the white man's burden today, though, is more that we are literally in a what you would call a fourth generation race war, and all of the things that all the benefits, science, technology, wealth, education, medicine, what have you, that we've given to these other cultures and peoples is now weaponized against us. It's not really, you say that the white man has created the modern world, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like everyone really knows how to appreciate that and or hates us for it. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so what it's in my view, what it's become really is a race war against whites. So my view is that every single thing that we do, that we've invented, all of our resources should be pulled back and kept within what I call the imperium, which would be just white countries for white peoples and etc. So my
Okay.
view is that we need to free ourselves from colonialism. We need to free ourselves from what I call, I guess what I interpret to be the white man's burden, which is this
Yeah.
forced integration, forced diversity. It's now become a ball and chain, or many chains and balls and chains, and kind of a prison that we have to live in. Um, it's not all bad, of course. There's good things in terms of like what we've shared and learned from each other in different cultures, but we're not living in a kumbaya fake reality. We're not living in the 1950s. We're living in the age of white genocide, and as such, we as a people need to take responsibility for ourselves, have racial consciousness, racial spirituality even, and look at our family, our extended white brothers and sisters, and say, you know, we've got to pull back. We've got to take care of our own. I think there's a popular meme out there. It's a image of the world with white countries and all these black figures moving into these white countries, and it's saying, you know, white people be like, we got to help the minorities, and actually we're the minority on a global scale. We're living in you know, in a global era, if you will. So we all know, you know, what's happening, really, who's behind it, why it's happening, all the rest of it. But you know, my perspective on this theme is that the white man's burden is diversity and equity, inclusion, Marxism, all of these things that have been weaponized against us. So the image I'm creating here is of a man smashing the chains that bind him, sort of a kind of a, you know, ubiquitous white man kind of mythic type figure. With, you know, I'm really just jamming on the idea. I don't know what symbols I might use, or, you know, originally I had some other ideas that were perhaps a little less appropriate for YouTube.
Yeah, fair enough.
But
Awesome.
So that's about it in a nutshell.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've just started jamming a very first idea, which is literally just a sort of historic reference, portrait reference to all of the significant cultural empires, and then maybe some background elements which are almost like hissing or at them. I don't know. I'm yet to really come up with something concrete, so I'm just going to do what I usually do and sort of flesh out a few different sketches and ideas, and then I'll finalize throughout the week. But let's play the first clip. Mind you, your audience aren't going to be able to hear it through
yeah, I guess I could try to play it on my end. This is something we haven't figured out.
We didn't
So
think that through much.
What I can do is paraphrase the clip, though. So why don't you go ahead, and I'll play it on my end, and we'll see how it goes. If there's a clash,
well, play it on your end. I'm gonna be silent anyway. So hopefully we're in sync. So let's just play at the same time.
The way my setup is right now, I don't know that the audio is going to make it from my laptop to my phone. Okay. So I think you'd better do it. I'll listen, and then I'll talk about it in a moment. Okay, so let's just go ahead with our original plan.
Okay, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
It was a complex and multifaceted endeavor. Brought about significant advancements, not only in sub-Saharan, but also in other parts. There are the first two significant efforts taken upon West as a force for good in the world. One, abolition of slave trade. European powers such as the pivotal in abolishing the transatlantic slave trade. The abolitionist movement gained momentum throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, with key figures such as William Wilberforce and Thomas Clarkson leading the charge. The Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 in Britain and the Emancipation Proclamation in the United States in 1863 marked crucial milestones in the fight against slavery. 2. Creation of borders and boundaries in Africa. The establishment of borders and boundaries in various regions of the world was driven by European colonial powers. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, presided over by Chancellor Otto von Bismarck of Germany, formalized the partitioning of Africa among European nations. This led to the drawing of artificial borders that divided ethnic groups and communities, setting the stage for colonization and subsequent independence movements. Slavery in Africa predated European involvement and was often practiced by native rulers, with Africans selling to European slavers. European colonial powers imposed Africa partly to regulate and suppress the slave trade, asserting territorial control. While these borders were sometimes disruptive, they also stability. Understanding this history helps to navigate Africa's complex past and work towards a more equitable future. The British Empire played a significant role in reducing ongoing conflicts between Muslims and Hindus in India by establishing borders and administrative divisions. Prior to British colonization, India was characterized by deep-seated religious and cultural divisions that often led to tensions and conflicts between Muslim and Hindu communities. Recognizing the need to maintain control and stability within their colonial territories, the British implemented policies that delineated clear boundaries between regions with significant Muslim and Hindu populations. One of the most significant actions taken by the British was the partition of British India in 1947, which led to the creation of the separate nations of India and Pakistan. Tensions by establishing a Muslim-majority Pakistan separate from the predominantly Hindu India. While the partition process itself was fraught with violence and displacement, resulting in widespread suffering and loss of life, it ultimately served to reduce ongoing conflicts and mitigate communal tensions between Muslims and Hindus. By establishing clear borders and administrative units based on religious demographics, the British Empire helped to create a degree of political stability and cooperation between Muslim and Hindu communities in the region. While the legacy of partition continues to shape relations between India and Pakistan, it is undeniable that the establishment of borders by the British played a crucial role in reducing intercommunal conflicts and fostering a semblance of peace and order in the region. Let's continue to explore the blessings European man has bestowed on outside nations in healthcare.
And that was it. Yeah. So the gist of that was the gist of that was basically slavery was done away with. That was one of the things of colonialism. Slavery was done away with. And obviously that's completely overlooked. And we're constantly kind of, I mean, Europe generally got involved with the Atlantic slave trade, lasted for a very short span compared to, you know, the rest of recorded history, especially sort of in the Middle East and whatnot. And we're kind of heralded as the greatest criminals for it, which is madness. And then we were the ones which took it upon ourselves to abolish it. And one connection I kind of came across was the fact that one of the results of colonialism, or you know, the influence that Western man had in places like Africa, for example, was the carving up of Africa, and you know, making nation states and putting in governance systems and systems of law in place. And that was really exactly around the same time. And it seems to me that that was done in order to help curb slavery, because it basically said that these people belong to this district and the government is there to protect these people under these laws and this legislation, you know. So it was, they were protection mechanisms and things which, you know, we'd kind of implemented into our own societies along the way. Otherwise it would just revert to sort of tribal kingship and you know, camps that would just revert back to capturing each other and selling them off to other parts of the world. So, you know, that was one of the things that really stood out to me.
How I view the world in a way is I don't know if this is the proper terminology, but I see it as split into two. That one is what I would call maybe the indigenous world, and the other being the modern world. And what occurs in the, and neither of those are meant to have like, any kind of baggage with it. I'm just using them as terms to describe the worlds that exist. So the modern world is the white man's world. It's everything. It's civilization itself. And
Hmm.
so, and whereas the indigenous world is one that follows more the patterns of nature, but it doesn't have the kind of, it has its own indigenous ways in terms of like what they consider law or order or human rights or all of these other types of things. And it's too complex to get into in like a, that would take ages to unravel all of that information. But what we're pointing out here is how the modern world brought civilization to these indigenous worlds that may not even have had any civilization per se at all, and mainly because they can't produce civilization. The even today, if we look at Africa, Central America, the human rights abuses are off the charts. They're off the charts. They've always been like that. They continue to be like that. They just don't seem to have any sense of human rights. And a lot of what human rights comes from is civilization. It's the law, order, being able to enforce, these kinds of these things. So it's a fascinating, that's essentially kind of how I sort of divide things up. I do
Hmm.
feel that, like, history is history. All nations, all peoples have not colonized, have had wars against each other's. It's not to blame it all on Whitey is just some gay Marxist BS. It's really some BS that you're gonna get in your local university. That nobody. I mean, anybody with half a brain can see past that. Unfortunately, most people don't actually do any thinking. They don't do any research. So it's a kind of thing that we in our movement really have to make an effort to break down these illusions, these myths and such. And then,
Hmm.
I give an example. There's someone I know who's from the Caribbean, and he's half black, half indigenous, and
Is that the guy that you spar with?
no, this is that. Fortunately, that guy's cool. He's not anti-white. But this particular person was trying to kind of bully me into, it just sort of, he was trying to like exert power and dominance, and like, he was losing some kind of an argument, so he pulled the race card out and the slavery card out, and he wanted to have a go with me, and he didn't know who he was dealing with. So like that situation didn't work out very well for him. So he was like, "Oh, the blacks and slavery and da da da," and I just came back at him with all kinds of facts, and about who owned the ships and who had a civil war, who ended slavery, who the Civil War is a complex issue in America. It's not all slavery, but and then about, what about the blacks that captured other blacks in Africa, and what about them? Like, well, who pays who the reparations? Like, right now there's a gigantic push for reparations in
Hmm.
America, which is again another Marxist scam. It's just an absolute scam. So these aren't small issues. These are real issues that we have to have real discussions about. And we have to prepare white people to know how to talk about these things and be able to protect our interests.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with much of what you said. Hold up is it the audio okay?
Yeah. Your mic's, I guess my mic is distorting. Whose mic is distorting?
Yeah,
Both
yeah.
of them.
Yours was distorting first, and
All
then
right.
mine's. I think it's okay now. I think you got a call again. You must have got a call on your phone, something like that.
I cannot escape tech problems on this show. I mean, this whole, there's always one thing or another, and I don't know what it is. I've got all my browsers shut down. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it must just be when you get a call, it just interferes with the natural audio. Never mind.
Possibly.
But yeah, I mean,
maybe we're being...
I think I think one of the main things is, well, if you spoke to a lot of other blacks, they're trying to steal a lot of our history and say that they were the original everything. You know, original, and they're pissing off every group of people at the moment. They're trying to steal a lot of the Egyptian, which a lot of the Egyptians are kind of angry at them for trying to adopt or claim stake to all of their culture and their history, which I believe whites were a part of really early on anyway, to be honest. And then it became a bit more Arabized later. But either way, I think they're trying to say they were even the Moors in China. They're literally every single cultural empire they are kind of trying to claim stake to. So they wouldn't agree with this premise at all. But I find it odd that a people that was that capable suddenly became, I don't know, dominated by every other group. It's a bit odd.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting massive interference on my end. I don't know. Maybe I'll just wait a little while. Do you want to play another audio clip on your?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
do that.
Advancements in healthcare, urbanization, and migration to regions beyond sub-Saharan Africa. British implemented public health reforms under the leadership of figures such as Sir Ronald Ross, who made groundbreaking discoveries in the field of tropical medicine. Urban centers like Bombay, now Mumbai, became hubs of economic activity and cultural influence from rural areas seeking employment opportunities. Stability and improved governance. Colonial rule facilitated political stability and governance structures in many regions. In South America, Spanish and Portuguese colonizers established colonial administrations that laid the foundation. Figures like Simon Bolivar played instrumental roles in leading independence movements that resulted in the formation of sovereign states across the continent. 5. Economic development and infrastructure. European colonial powers invested in economic development and in regions such as India and South Africa. India, the British built railways, roads, and ports that facilitated trade and commerce, contributing to economic growth and modernization. In South America, colonizers exploited silver mines in regions like Potosi, Bolivia, which fueled economic expansion and trade with Europe. 6. Cultural exchange and education. Western colonialism facilitated cultural exchange and educational opportunities in regions around the world. In India, British colonial administrators established universities and schools that introduced Western ideas and knowledge to Indian society. Figures like Rabindranath Tagore emerged as advocates for cultural renewal and intellectual independence.
Yeah, so to summarize, there's a number of different things which, similar to the inventions stream from a couple of weeks ago, one thing I noticed was all of the most modern inventions, mostly from the white man, boosted economy, brought wealth, brought prosperity. And one of the key points to take away from that was, the natural privilege that a nation gets from the gifts of invention from that person. They bring wealth, they bring commerce, they bring things into the world that other people's need and want into their civilization. And one thing that a lot of colonialism did, although there's always going to be birthing pains, but it helped to set these nations up with infrastructure, from agriculture to technology advancements to governance, rule of law, and to really stabilize them and give them a springboard for them to become a sort of competitive in this sort of modern world.
Mm. Oh, I hate to say it, but the audio is horrendous on my end.
It is pretty bad, to be honest.
Is it? Can you hear that on your end, or I don't know if your audience can tell?
I know.
If your, but it's just not working on my end, unfortunately. I hate to say that.
Did you try turning off your flight mode, or do you need to be like on call or something?
I don't know how to do that. I'm just broadcasting on my phone. All the browsers are done. I'm not getting any calls in. So
Okay.
I don't when I talk, I don't hear any crunchiness. Yeah, Donald is master of cool angles. Anyway, I'm just reading. In my audience, can you guys tell me if my audio is crunchy and goofy, or is it just PatriArt when he talks? Someone let me know in the chat. And it comes and goes. It's not all the time.
Yeah. Shall I just go back up?
All right.
That's this. It's starting again.
Yeah, it's both of us. Well, I tell you what. Why don't you just play through the whatever the text, not the text, the audio clip on your end, so the audience, at least on your end, has
Done that comment. Donald's chi is too much for the grid. You're using the chi power, and you're causing a meltdown on the network.
I was actually doing qigong earlier, but I'm sure that's not the reason.
Yes. Well, I can play another one if you like. Let's go for it. We'll continue. This is a the next clip is talking about the contrast between the before and afters of colonialism. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah, did you play that? You finished that?
I did not, and I'm just trying to keep the audio to a minimum on my end, just
Okay,
to
fair enough.
avoid. But we sound clear right now, which is nice.
Yeah. So again, there were just some. I think the audio is fine right now. So
Yeah.
basically, there were just some contrasting before and afters of the influence of British colonialism with various places. Some of which went on to be very prosperous, such as Singapore, and that was initially just a small fishing village, and the intervention of the British Empire helped them to be, a power hub of trade and commerce, and they're doing really well now. Again, that's just the intervention of white man has set it up. India is one of the largest economies, although they've got their tendencies and things, but nonetheless, they've become a real dominant force within the tech sector, especially, and that's they've been set up from post-colonialism, and
right.
they weren't without their problems kind of getting to that point, but still it's the springboard that was provided. The common thread is that the countries or the places that haven't done so well when colonialism ended are a lot of these of the African-based nations, where they just completely revert back to type.
Yep.
And but obviously it's all the white man's fault. So how is it that some nations can kind of be elevated, and almost the baton has been passed on, and become successful in many ways and a competitor, but then some can't? So
okay, let me jump in here. We all know Jared Taylor from American Renaissance. He has a great story. When he was a young man, he used to do some traveling, and he traveled in Africa. He speaks fluent French, and he went to some of the French-speaking African countries. So while he was there, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which countries from his story that he's talking about, but he went across the border from one to another, and this other country was totally backwards and horrible, just filth everywhere, no infrastructure, almost lawless, just a horrendous culture. And the country was just not the culture, the country was just in absolute shambles. And he asked one of the Africans there on his trip, like, why is it that just over the border, this other country is pretty well? They've got running water and transportation and healthcare and blah blah blah, all this stuff. Like, why is it that they have that and you don't? And the citizen of that country said, because they have the benefit of colonialism. They and I mean, this is from their mouth, this is from their words. It's they know that without us, they'll just go backwards, they'll go back to the old ways. And I think that some countries in the world are sort of high IQ enough to take what we invent and then turn it into something, specifically Eastern Asian countries and maybe India to some extent. It's really all about IQ. All of that's about IQ. But the fact is, I have a friend who He's just always in the, like the black neighborhood doing different kinds of work and stuff. And I once said to him, you know, you can help them, but you can't fix them. And he told me to leave his house after I said that.
Wow.
I mean, he was so offended when I said that. Like, you can help them, but you can't fix them. And
Well,
I'm
isn't
not
that the
against.
same thing? It's
Go ahead.
it's saying you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's the same principle, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that perhaps to a degree, but I mean, it's, you just can't change someone's DNA. You know, you after, you know, thousands of years or tens of thousands of years of evolution or whatever the situation is, they are what they are. That's called race realism. And ultimately, we don't have to have like a negative view of that. It's not an insult per se to just point out the reality that, you know, these people are this way and they've always been this way and they'll always be this way. It's who they are genetically as a race, as an ethnicity. And as the sooner we grow up and act like adults about that, the better. So, you know, like if you're, let's say you have a child and your child has some learning disabilities, you're not going to force that child into classes that they can't succeed in, you know.
Mm.
And that's cruel. That really is actually cruel to do to a child. Well, why are we putting people of color in circumstances where they can't succeed? Why not, you know, in countries like America, you know, where we have a history where, you know, with African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanics, etc., then why would we create an education system where they have to blah blah blah? You get the idea.
Yeah.
Ultimately, whites have to have their own schools. We have to have our own communities. To be forced together with people of who are biologically have lower IQ than us, and that low IQ is not just passing tests. That's about violent behavior. That's antisocial behavior. It's all linked together. So then we're the
Yeah.
ones that suffer, you know, and this is the white man's burden today. That's my view.
True. True. I think. I mean, that was it. It was the ultimately the white man's burden, as felt by the white man, was the need to civilize the world, and
Yeah.
there might have been some element of well, they're not utilizing this great amount of resource. They're not putting it to use, so let's extract it. I mean,
Yeah.
I was watching a video the other day. There was in the Middle East, for example.
Yeah.
The First World War was mostly about the sort of, well, it was spawned by the need and desire for oil, and because oil was going to be the new gold, right, for the
Yeah.
modern world. And I think it was Germany that kind of approached the Middle East, and they did enough with them. And apparently there was massive on opioids at the time and half baked. And they struck a great deal where Germany would profit massively, like over 80% for every barrel that they managed to extract. And they struck gold. They got the barrels that they needed, and then it was the case that Britain had to compete, and so they were pretty much adamant to ensure that Germany didn't get too powerful again. And then they were basically pushing for a war with Germany, because they were sort of in the ahead in the race for
Right.
the oil, and
Sure.
basically being dominating the world markets again.
Yeah.
And then and so there was some death that happened. I think it was some royal family death that was. It's just some petty issue that justified the war, and then
World War I.
so that happened, yeah. And then I mean, I'm sure there was more in play, but oil was definitely one of the factors, and extracting that. And maybe gone off topic a little bit, but I think in some ways it was the lack of. Sometimes it's been the lack of drive for other peoples to pursue, and that's one thing the white man has always strived to do, is to is to elevate, to go to that next level, to push the boundaries. And I think maybe to a certain extent, we've pushed boundaries where they shouldn't be pushed.
Yes.
We've tried to make, say, a child ride a bike before he can walk, type thing. And that sounds really racist, but if cultures and peoples aren't ready for certain things, then they're not going to be in their best interests. So in some ways, the white man's influence on the world has been negative, as you see in the case studies. For some peoples, they couldn't replicate it, and it was a disaster, and led to even bloodshed, like the massacres in Haiti. The uprisals there.
I'm not pro-colonialism. I'm not at all that. I'm an isolationist, and I think that if I don't, I'm sorry, am I cutting you off? Did you finish your point?
No, not at all. I mean, pretty much finished. I was just gonna say that somewhere like Haiti and Rhodesia and that they failed to maintain, whereas like you said, in India and some of the other Asian nations were able to kind of take the baton and kind of run with it.
So you're covering a lot of ground here. For starters, I think the competition between European countries, specifically the kings of European countries in the 1800s, etc., was horrible for Europe overall. The kind of the wars that we had. A lot of this, I feel like it's I don't know, it's going back to an earlier time, and there's like, go to war because the king was offended, or because or we're competing with X, Y. Today, Europe and white peoples in general, I think, are evolving or must evolve into one people and understand ourselves as such. So these things were catastrophic for us overall, and we no longer live in a. I think this is a very European perspective, but we have to kind of relinquish a certain level of ethnic identity for racial identity. That our racial identity in the modern world, in the postmodern world, is our true context, our true identity, and we have to work together from that perspective. But then on this other thing, like why did we feel that we had to civilize other non-white peoples? Like, out of what? Was that Christian charity? Was that what that was?
I think one thing actually reminded me of a point that I was making earlier, which I kind of went down, talking about the oil. I think it's a multi-pronged reason, partly commerce and greed and drive and wanting to make money and wealth and accumulate. So it was like that need for oil that we went into the Middle East, and the same reasons why we went into Africa and take a lot of the resources in that rich land. Africa is a rich land, but they were unable to extract. They can't. They don't seem to be able to collectivize or don't even really care to do so.
No.
Whereas obviously whites have a desire for it, and with things like for oil, for example, which seem to be a necessary commodity for the modern world, it's like, well, we'll go to the Middle East and take it from there. So it's partly charity and partly drive for just maintaining and pushing boundaries.
Yeah, because I think it's backfired in a catastrophic way. We should have never interfered with any of these people. I think we could have found ways to trade with them, to set up outposts to benefit them, in a sense of like, okay, we want to build a banana plantation here in Colombia or whatever, and we'll give you whatever these little benefits are, something. But in the old days, that wasn't the way people thought. For example, I was in the Caribbean, and I toured it's kind of like a rum, a factory, but the
Okay.
history of the factory showed that, you know, when the Spaniards came and created these sort of plantations, they would build little towns where the workers lived, and each town had its own currency, so that when you made money from your work, you could only spend it within the plantation town, and it was the currency was unique to that town. So ultimately,
Right.
yeah, you could have families and a home and this and that, but you were in a sense a slave to that plantation town. You know, how would you ever leave if you ever wanted to leave? You know, how would you
Hmm.
transfer your money? You see where I'm going with that. So the times were different. You know, people with money and power didn't ever think in terms of the liberty of individuals. You know, you see where I'm going with that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's you know, in some regard, we are, how do I say, like, history mingles, and we have to cope with those structures that created, you know, whatever historic issues of the time. But I'm sure as hell not gonna take it on and say, like, oh, you know, it's my fault that these things happened and therefore I owe you money. Well, fuck off. You know, that's not how it's gonna work, babe. You know, that's not how
Yeah.
it's gonna go.
Well,
And there's just a lot of low IQ idiots out there that are trying to hurt whites with the reparations concept and such. So, you know, it's fine for us to know history, but I really feel we need a racial divorce. That is ultimately the answer for whites, that it is the ultimate future for whites. We have to have a racial divorce.
yeah, I do. I do think we should remain separate for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, some people's managed to get on, but generally
It's
speaking, the host culture is always going to change, and I don't believe the West has become better for it. And one of the main problems I see from colonialism is, especially, well, I mean, for example, a lot of the African nations with the agriculture that brought the medicine and stuff, their population is booming. So in terms of
sure.
taking life,
Yeah.
the amount of life that has been sustained now in
Hmm.
Africa, their populations are so big,
Yeah.
and you know, generally speaking, there's still poverty,
Hmm.
and so it's like a Pandora's box where normally, I think nature would determine a
Yeah.
sort of a higher mortality rate, so there would
Sure. Sure.
be generally less poverty
Hmm.
overall, and there would be less spillage over into
Let less
European
population.
nations.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
population.
yeah. So
I mean, all the money that we've sent to Africa over the past however many decades it's created a population boom, and then now look how that's being weaponized against us. So again, all roads lead to separation, you know, to isolation. Our white lands, white resources, white technology for white people, that's the bottom line of it all, you know. So yeah,
yeah, I think I
that's
can agree
the
with that.
lesson we have to take from history.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Simple.
But yeah, it's like you you wouldn't want to. I don't think you should hurry on a people, you know, and I think sometimes we intervene. Well, I think we intervened for some people too soon. And,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people should
Well,
go at their
and
own pace. Nations
what
and
was it ever meant to be? Honestly, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I mean, I feel so. Like, for example, I'm a big supporter of Native American treaty rights and like preserving Native American culture. And I've done a
mm,
lot of work with local Native American tribes that live in my area, and I've come to know them well and know the history better than the average person, etc. And it occurred to me that it's too bad that, you know, the people who settled America didn't somehow think in terms of, like, how could we create I guess, a binary civilization where we help each other. I mean, the very first treaty between Native and European peoples is called the Two-Row Wampum Treaty. And
Yeah.
I was actually deeply involved in that a couple of years ago. Actually, more like 2012 or so. Anyway, that treaty basically says that, you know, we're two canoes on the river of life, riding side by side, but we will never cross paths. We will have our ways. You will have your ways. We will respect each other. We can trade. We can, you know, there won't be miscegenation or any of this stuff. We'll preserve our cultures and live peacefully. And this is the very first treaty that ever existed between Native and European peoples here in America.
Right.
So,
Okay.
right, it's a federal treaty. This still exists. And so, you know, why don't we use that as the basis of a racial treaty with all non-whites, to say, okay, you know, from here on out, we as white people collectively agree to leave you alone. But in turn, we want to be left alone. And we use this federal treaty as the basis of a new peace treaty, essentially a racial peace treaty, whereby, you know, you have your lands, we have our lands. You protect your people, we protect our, on and on and on and on. And we can trade.
Yeah.
We can trade. We can do, you know, whatever we want to do. We have freedom of association, and it's all good and well if, you know, if blah blah blah, you know, figure out the details. But it's not radical or crazy to think that we can't somehow do this. You know, anytime it's crazy. What's crazy is continuing to live the way we're living. You know, and you know, when you talk to say a person, you know, say like a black person or someone from the Caribbean, who, like this guy who was trying to bully me. And I said, like, you know, like, would you rather have been born in Africa or in the Caribbean or whatever, in America? Da, da. Oh, I don't want to, I'm glad I was born where I am. Da, da, da. All right. Well, then you benefited from slavery. So shut your mouth. Like, don't give me any shit. You just admitted to me you benefited from slavery. Conversation's over. Okay, you get all the benefits. Where would you be now if your ancestors weren't brought to the Caribbean? Shut up. You know, like, I'm done. No white guilt, folks. No white guilt. Now, you don't have to be mean or rude about it or whatever, but fuck guilt, man. Come on, that's just for idiots. Like, let it go.
It's a neo-communist attack, isn't it? But you know, the answer to the question is, the reason why we can't do that is obviously there are peoples which want to turn the world into some social experiment where it's like a post sort of Babylon times of it's like a, well, I think they're obviously disillusioned, creating trying to dissolve all the nation states. And that's what communism does, doesn't it? It severs a people from the roots. It tries to be the be all and end all. I mean, your heritage and is gives you an identity, and I guess the only identity they want you to have is one whereby you are who they say you are, type thing. So so yeah, there are forces working against us to stop us from being not having self-determination.
So we know that, you know, there's a certain ethnic religious group that's behind the narrative, the anti-white narrative. But I do feel that, you know, if people somehow were able to get beyond the TV bullshit of the, you know, that the garbage narratives that they believe in, that we could actually come to table and come up with some kind of sort of peace treaty whereby everybody benefits, you know. And I always feel like, you know, people like Candace Owens can be the ruler of the black ethno state, you know, like she would love that, you know, she would totally love the power that she had the audacity.
Well, I don't think she would want. She's married to a white man and she's got mixed children, so I don't think someone like her is up for segregation. But
so here's the thing. Greg Johnson of Countercurrents, which if you're in this culture, you should know who he is. He put out a book, the White Nationalist Manifesto. And in his book, he talks about how people who want to misogynate, they have to choose, like to live in the culture of the people that they misogynate with. And that stuff is kind of hairy. Like, how would you work that out?
Yeah.
And then also think about people who were born, say, half Asian, half white. Like, they don't have a choice that they were born that way, but they might identify more with white culture and want to live among whites, if they're in. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, like, it's definitely not it. There's a lot to be humanitarian about that. I think we really would have to sit down and figure that stuff out. It's definitely a little on the messy side, but I think it could be done. I think, again, it's called freedom of association, and people who want to live with and whomever, then they should be able to do that. I mean, living in a time in a culture where you can marry whoever you want, well, why can't you live in the community of whoever you want? You see what I'm saying? So, like, we can leverage their own bullshit against them in terms of discussing these matters.
Yeah.
I like, how can I say, like, I do not have any tolerance for Islam and Judaism in the West. Those do not belong whatsoever. They're completely incompatible.
No.
I mean, those are ideological and religious, though. Go on.
Well, I believe Christianity should be the national religion for the white man. Obviously, that might be biased, but I clearly are biased. Yeah, but
I like how you phrase that. I might be biased.
Yeah,
but
but yeah, I believe that if you are a Christian nation, that it should be Christian. You shouldn't have. I think it should be under the the religious law as well. I think there should be a merging of religious law and we shouldn't be so tolerant to other religions because it's a cultural fraction as well. And I think Christianity is a religion that was kind of birthed from Western man, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people say, "Oh, Judeo-Christianity," but I mean, that is a perversion of what Christianity is.
So that could lead into the Aryan Israel conversation.
Anglo-Israel, yeah. I mean, I've been studying this at length for a very long time, and I mean, to me, it's it's illuminated my previous knowledge of an understanding, and it answered so many questions.
Could you give a quick like definition of what is the Anglo?
Well, it's essentially well, as you know, the Bible is the Old Testament, for example. There's an Old Covenant which is centered around Israel and the Hebrew people. There's a grand prophecy of Abraham is the father of many nations, and essentially those many nations would come through a particular line, Jacob, who was later named Israel, and that lineage would later migrate into Europe, and there has been some amalgamations with some of the European settlers there already, although there would have been fewer in number and quite sparse through the line of Japheth. But they were swallowed up by a lot of the Germanic tribes, Cimmerian, Celtic tribes, and so yeah, there's that message, and ultimately it's the wider house of Israel which adopted the New Testament, and that's really where who were regarded as the Gentiles. The Gentiles were, the Greek word is ethnos, which essentially means nations, and these were the nations of Abraham under the promise that they would be kind of brought back into the fold under the banner of Christ, and that's really exactly what we see that transpired with under through Christendom. And you look at where the apostles went to preach; it was all to one kind of lineage of people, a family, a body of people, and that's really the message. So basically, the people of the book are kind of wise, and the, you know, the
So
Jews
what you're
really
saying,
are.
let me clarify. What you're saying is the true Israelites are white people.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And a lot of people try and claim stake to that, but I've studied it length, and all the markers point to you know, whites being that people, can only fit that people. For one, the seed was always prophesied to spread around the whole world. Only one race has done that. That's the white man. This race was to bring the rule of law and God's law to the whole entire globe, around well, the whole world. All these different markers of what Israel was to be correlates with the white man and what's transpired in history.
What whites have already done.
Exactly, yeah, and even and so the new covenant, it says the days are coming when I will establish a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Jacob. So there's two houses essentially. There was, sorry, the house of Judah and the house of Israel. The house of Israel was the majority, 10 tribes which went into dispersion. They became the Scythians, Cimmerians, and even the Romans. They branched off, although they were from Judah under the Trojan line. But and then what happened with Judah and Judea at the time was they became an amalgamated people with proselytes came in, and it was that's where Judaism was essentially born. It was a proselyte religion and influenced from the Babylonian kind of sects and peoples around there, and that's when it became more Arabized and so on, and the language changed. If you look at the original Paleo Hebrew, you see how closely they resemble runes and things. And you look at the continuation of language and the origins of the language and stuff. There's so many similarities, and so yeah, these, you know, branch offs occurred, and mass migration patterns, and so, you know, it's consistent. And what we're taught today is wordplay, trickery to the nth degree, and a usurped identity. Really, that's what's happened. And then you get the Christian Zionists and things that believe that the people that say they're Jews. I mean, even you've got books in the book of Revelations. It talks about those who say they are Jews but are not, but lie. And these are essentially the, you know, what you would class as Edomite fraction, which have always been kind of hostile to the people of the book. So it's, you know, there's a lot of things which need to be relearned. And I think in an age where we can understand scripture, like I use an app called Blue Letter Bible, and you can go to the origin source words and the Greek lexicons and things, and you're not reading it through the lens of, for one, a tinted lens of pre-indoctrination, and two, through the translation of something like the King James, where they will render certain words as they feel appropriate and may not really be conducive to the original context. Like I said, the word Gentiles is a made-up word, and this actual root is in Latin, which means gentilis, which means of the same tribe, clan, or you know, kindred people. So it's even a Latin word that wasn't actually even included in the Latin Vulgate. So the word has really always been nations and people, and these were the nations that were dispersed of Abraham. Then, you know, you look to where the apostles went.
What ethnicity was Abraham?
Abraham was a Caucasian white man.
Okay, so this is this is pretty heavy stuff. Now, my interest in this is how it undermines Jewish power. So, as someone who is kind of more Gnostic and has, Eastern philosophy and all of my, my whole background, I care very much about liberating whites from Jewish power. And so I think that the kind of average person, say, who's, I don't even, how do I put this? Say from like a non-Christian perspective, that is why this is an important discussion. And, I think we're going to, as a movement, as white people in general, we have to take that into account as well. It's, with all due respect, of course, towards Christians, I'm not trying to diminish the Christian aspect of this, but rather to reframe what you're saying as something for the
As
rest of
historic
us,
truth.
as as something we should get behind. That if we as people in the movement, as the white identity movement, get behind something that could completely disenfranchise and redefine Christianity as non-Jewish, then that would totally rob our slave masters of their historic narrative. And that's a message I can totally get behind. You see what I'm saying? So this is something I'm trying to
for sure.
get across to the audience.
Well, I think the understanding and the Christian Zionism, for example, has grown massively the past 100 years. But prior to that, no one really thought that the Jews themselves were the people of the book. It was always understood that they were it was a secular religion that still tried to adhere to the Old Testament practices, but really their main book is the Talmud.
Yes.
Which is very contrary to a lot of the old biblical teachings.
Mm-hmm.
For example, usury isn't.
Oh God,
allowed.
it's totally contradictory to Christianity. The Talmud is like basically
But
satanic.
even a lot of the old covenant tenets in the but yeah, that's my understanding, and I'm aware there's maybe some other pagans or listening to this and kind of begrudging this as a truth, because I understand that they probably they can't shake off the thought that the Bible is a Caucasian white man's book, but it really is that is the truth. And if you think about it, if people did recognize this as a truth, I think it would really put it in perspective that as something that's binding, racially binding, just in the same way that it has worked for the Jews,
right,
to maintain a sort of a collective base, or collective identity. It can help us as well reestablish a collective identity. I mean, for example, one of the proofs I came across, look at the Declaration of Arbroath, which was a Scottish city that was trying to break free from the rule of England.
Okay.
And it says clear as day, they saw themselves as Israelites from the line of the Scythians. It says something like, I'm paraphrasing now.
Yeah.
It says, hence we came 2,000 years after crossing the Red Sea, the Israelites, the Scythians, one sec, where are we? Yeah, there we are. To the west where we dwell today. I mean, I'm really bad at paraphrasing the whole thing. I can't remember, but the general sentiment is starting out understanding that they were Israelites having crossed the Red Sea, and then later migrating as under the kind of the lineage of the Scythians, which migrated west into the west, where they belong today. And the Scots had a massive migration path through to Spain. A lot of the Celtic tribes set up in Hibernia,
Yeah,
Hiberia,
I've heard of it.
which Hiberia is rooted in Hebrew,
Okay.
which means that far away land, or the land on the opposite side. You've got and then you've got Ireland, which was actually named Era Hiberia. So, and you look at a lot of the Celtic language and stuff, especially Welsh, is very similar to ancient Hebrew. There's so many proofs, and not just scripturally, but historically, and it just really there cannot be another people. For a start, if you're a Christian and you believe that there's a new covenant established, then just read Jeremiah 31:31, and you will see that there's only one mention of who a new covenant would be established with. And if that people has rejected that covenant, then it cannot be that people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, interesting. So, I think what maybe we can do is have a really interesting conversation showing two sides of this particular topic, and that being the Christian side, and then someone who maybe is not. I have a relationship with Christ, but it's my personal business, and I don't care to talk about it, and I'm not trying to promote it or anything. But I have an objective enough perspective, angle, position that I can maybe, represent another side, I guess, of this, because I think not everyone in the movement is Christian, right? And so, not only that, right, and not only that, our mission largely is about the survival of our people and our race. And so it's important to have more than one perspective on this. So I think we could have that conversation. And certain people are gonna bring very angry, biased opinions to the table on it. That's not the point of the conversation. Open your fucking mind. We're talking about taking power away from the Jews. Okay, does that mean anything to you? Can you drop your shit for 10 seconds and listen? Because that's what this is about. Okay, so stop carrying your torch, your pitchfork and your torch, and set it down for 10 seconds and say, we're in this together. Okay, if Christians, white Christians, could pick this up, get it, figure it out, integrate it, and then how would that change everything? It would change it like profoundly, beyond imagination, and for all history. Do you understand? This is the point of this conversation.
But that was one of the key messages, with the originally. With the spreading of the gospel, it was a set of tribes that were lost, and I know we had our different cultures and stuff, but we were still sort of waging war against each other. And I know we did do that under Christendom as well, and it took a while to fully amalgamate. But we, as European nations, we eventually all acted and conducted our culture towards and rule of law towards Christian identity, and that's when we truly thrived. I think that's undeniable. You can't really deny that the adoption of Christianity under a banner. I mean, for example, if we were still barbaric sort of tribes still waging war against each other for dominion, and
which we still are in a way, right? Only
we still are, to a certain extent. But for example, one thing, although there, I don't agree with a lot of the Catholic Church practices, but we would never have been able to rally and muster up such a united force to go against the hordes of Islam, for example, if it wasn't for the Catholic Church and the Pope and a united faith and belief to band together
And we need that
and
now.
really repel. And
We need that
that's,
now. So
that's why I think it's a resurgence whereby it's like, well, this is the identity that we have been kind of fooled into believing that it is not us.
Yeah, I guess we'll see how it goes, because the longer we fight each other over things like Christianity, the more the enemy gains ground. And my thinking is that is a conversation for after we win. And you're not really going to change your mind anyway, so why even have the fucking conversation? You know what I'm saying? Like, that isn't really relevant. What's relevant is survival, and that's the conversation we should be having. And if Christians have the numbers and the power and the passion and the reason and the resources, then get behind them, because this is a fight for our very existence. So I'm not gonna, and again, me being someone with like kind of a very different kind of religious esoteric background, if I can do this, then anybody can do this. And again, it's the meme, together. It's the what do you call it? The sort of the pagan warrior side by side with the crusader, and they're fist bumping and saying together, and facing forward, not punching right, as they say, towards the enemy, because it's the odds are against us, and the clock is about to strike 12. This isn't a time for us to have even more debate about Christianity. You're not going to change your mind. Nobody's going to change their mind. That isn't even the fucking issue. Okay, it's about survival. So that's why Aryan Israel, that whole topic to me is something that everybody in the dissident right needs to start educating themselves about, and take whatever position you want in on the battlefield, but face forward. Don't face next to your brother and your sister. So Pastor Eli James, I believe that's his name. Is that correct? Pastor Eli James.
I'm not sure.
And so so you can look up Anglo. I actually have the website. Anyway, if you just simply look up Anglo Israel, Pastor Eli James, you're going to start opening up huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's many others as well. Many others. I mean, I tend to go to, but you can just start looking up. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different teachers on this, really.
Oh, okay.
On stuff.
Right. And
So,
I'm not showing disrespect towards my pagan brothers and sisters or people, Apollonians or anything. That's because what I'm trying to just point out is that isn't even the issue. That isn't really what's going on. You're really never going to agree. So what's the point of even having, fighting about these things? So I'm really just all about winning, and like, we just simply have to come together. Like, if you look at nations at war, these different nations have different, the Axis powers versus, the Allied powers. Like, there's different ideologies. Everyone has different cultures, different histories. Put that aside. That isn't even really what's happening. Okay, we're here to survive. So let's get on with it. I think I'm sort of kind of like 90% done with my image here. I'm surprised that I actually semi-finished.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. I like the I like the sort of the lights and darks. What would you call it? The
contrast, yeah.
Contrast of it all, and not just that, but the arrangement of lights and darks as well. The compositional.
I appreciate that. Yeah, composition is super important to me. I feel like it's one of my my strengths, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
I actually changed this a bit because a lot of my work is very symmetrical. And
yeah, I find mine can be like that as well.
Yeah, I would like it to be more organic. So I think there's a bit of a balance here, because there's a certain balance to this piece. You have this kind of X thing happening with like forces moving this way and this way, foreground, middle ground, background, maybe, the light, the contrast of the light. And then it's very brushy. There's a lot of physical movement in the brushwork, which I think gives it a lively energy, because it's this is an energetic image. It's about the passion of freeing ourselves. So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind hearing from the audience, what they feel about that as well. There's quite a lot of conversation going on here. I'm trying to post people's.
Just quick plug on that. One person I recommend that I started listening to early when I was researching that topic. By the way, I don't want to bring it back and kind of milk it, but
Right.
Compare, Pastor Compare, and he's an older guy, but he really did a lot of good stuff that I read. Initially trying to disprove the stuff, but then kind of realizing that, wow, this has got something to it. So Compare, look up that.
How do you spell that? How do you spell that?
Compare, COMPARET, or maybe it's or was it Compare?
Is he French? I'm trying to.
1 second. Bertrand Compare, I think. Yeah, Bertrand Compare.
Oh, that's definitely French. Yeah. So that's really funny when someone makes a point to try to disprove something, and through the research they end up believing in it. That's funny.
Well, yeah, it was.
But I mean,
yes.
if Christianity as a Western tradition and culture could be divorced from its Jewish infiltration, its Talmudic poisons, then wouldn't that be good for Europe and whites moving forward? I mean, obviously, whether someone's Christian or not, I think it's agreeable.
Yeah. Well, I think a return to a true sense of identity would also make us realize. I think one thing that's Christianity today has become so weak, which people are put off by it. It's weak. It feels like we need to subvert ourselves in order to be righteous and holy and good. And it's a shadow of what it was. I mean, as crusaders, we were noble, we were warriors, we fought for what is good. We tore down evil where we saw it. It's that kind of thing. We need a muscular, strong identity in Christianity, and that is it. When you understand that and try and, I guess there are certain prejudices towards Christianity because of that. The fact they see a lot of the problems that's come from sort of the modern Christian kind of set of doctrines, and I totally get it. But I would strongly encourage, like you say, to try and keep an open mind, research a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll see that it is both I believe that it's the root of our salvation as a people, and mentally, physically, and spiritually.
So it's fascinating stuff. It's really powerful stuff. People have to get into the research of it. So I don't. We haven't prepared any links or whatever. But I think this is just the beginning of probably a much longer conversation that we'll get into. And again, for me personally, my main my main interest in this topic is about freeing our people from Zionist Talmudic mind control, which I think the critics of Christianity would say that's what it is. So there's different reasons or different approaches to why this is something our movement should discuss, and look into. But the other thing that is really, really important to notice right now is that mainstream normie conservative incorporated Christians are getting J-pilled hard right now. You know, you look at, of course,
I think they're
big
not
news.
helping themselves with the whole Gaza thing.
Well, that
I mean,
triggered it, and then you've got things like Candace Owens getting fired for going after Jewish power by, you know, Ben Shapiro. I mean, this is something that people can't not notice, and it's these people are going to grift really hard on this in the coming weeks and months. They're going to be looking for content to resource so that they can keep their grift going, and they're going to find the E. Michael Jones, the Lucas Gage, the you know, everybody who's our influencers. You know, I'm hoping that they find Mark Collette and you know, Joel Davis, and you know, anybody.
There's a lot of
everybody.
people doing great things in our movements.
Yeah,
I mean, Mark is an absolute champion, isn't he? Really,
100,000%. And so this is
I
why
sometimes worry for Mark, to be honest. You know, when all these laws are coming into play, and it's like, wow, you could just say one thing that they don't like, and they could build and fabricate evidence. And
yeah, well, I hate to say it, but like the news in America just went south big time because the feds just got something like $270 million for what they call red flag laws, which is essentially it's bullshit. It's basically saying, oh, somebody said something that we don't like online, and therefore we're going to use our power to, you know, go against their civil rights, to, you know, look at their internet search, their YouTube channel, and we're gonna build a case on this person because we think that they're you know, they could be a domestic terrorist. They're heading towards Bolshevism. We are on a slippery slope right now.
It is that, and I think they're escalating it, and I think that's why, you know, I think I always saw what Israel, the Palestine conflict, what happened on the October 7th or whatever, I always saw that as an opportunity for a power play, a necessary power play. And I mean, I think we are heading towards worldwide conflict at some point in the next sort of 5 years. It's shaping up that way, and it has to, for world powers to establish their dominion and cultural dominance. You know, it's that, isn't it? It's the same way it was shaping up with prior to World War II kicking off. You know,
right. So that's the thing. It's election year in the States. They've done everything imaginable to try to go after Trump, try to, you know, day by day, week by week, to cut off our freedoms and turn this into a Bolshevik nightmare. It's just nonstop. The public everybody knows, but we're entering into economic collapse now. There was a bridge that was just blown up in Baltimore. People don't understand, like, they can't see things on like a metapolitical level. This particular bridge is like a key area for where items are shipped into the country and then spread out. And so when you're at war with a country, you blow up bridges and things to stop the supply chain. And this helps to shut down, you know, infrastructure. So Obama is openly meeting with the Indian guy, I forget his name, in the UK. Say that again. I didn't.
Rishi Sunak. I mean,
yeah. Like, what the fuck is Obama meeting with him for openly? Like, oh yeah, we're just having.
I mean, he's a World Economic Forum stooge, and he wasn't even elected. I mean, I know he's, you know, conservatives were elected moons ago, but it's like this. I think every time there's like a new face to represent the people, there needs to be an election on them as well. It shouldn't just be like, oh, just because, you know, you're part of this party. It's like, you can just bring in anyone then. And like they brought, what's his name back, Cameron. Like, he's just made an appearance again after probably spying on China. I don't know.
We all know what has to happen, but none of us really can say it out loud. And that's just like, that's all I have to say on that particular topic. Especially now that, you know, they're going full Bolshevik, you know,
It
with
is.
these red flag
I
laws.
mean,
Yeah.
you know, my wife's Romanian, and you know, I'm currently here anyway. But and you know, I hear stories about how it was, and it's not good. And anyone that thinks, you know, communism is like some force for good in the world, you're a fool. You're an
Indeed.
absolute fool.
100%. I mean, they don't even, those people are just nothing. I mean, they're just cannon fodder.
No, I think they're just self-loathing twerps.
Exactly.
Like self-loathing degenerate twerps. I mean,
yeah.
They hate themselves. They hate they hate their own people. They hate their own kind. They hate their own culture, and they're on self-destruct mode. That's,
you know,
really
they're really just someone to put in front of a camera. You know what I'm saying? Like, because like they're gonna get nothing. You know, like they're not gonna get anything. But you know, put them in front of a camera every day. You know, it's some twisted shit. Very, very much so. But I don't know what to say. Speaking of things to say, I feel like we've probably said everything we have again about the white
well,
man's
yeah,
burden.
maybe just some conclusive comments on the white man's burden. Which what would you say? How would you
Gosh, to wrap
conclude?
that up? Well, colonialism was a tragedy and a mistake and something that we never should have done. But I mean, it's anybody can sit back and make these grand statements over history that it's absurd. And you know, 100, 200, 500 years from now, people will say we never should have done X, and that's a simple, easy thing to do. The thing is, how do you take history and transform it? How do you learn from it and make it better? So this is why I recommend things like a two-row wampum treaty for whites and non-whites, that we come to table rationally in peace and say we want to forge a new racial relationship, a treaty that is federally recognized where everybody is treated fairly. Whites are a political demographic that is recognized by our governments, and that we are a people. We have to preserve our culture, race, ethnicity, history, heritage, but we reserve the right to remain separate according to our freedom of association. We can and will trade, do whatever it is that we want to do, go party together, go, you know, do things together, build things together, have fun together, have relationships together according to each individual's will. And that's fine, and that's normal, and that can happen in a positive way. However, we reserve the right for safe zones where only our people can live, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just kind of summing up the basic things that I had to say earlier in the show. There's no ill will. I don't, you know, wish any harm on non-whites. I only wish for sovereignty of whites, and I'm open to the idea of people who are biracial having a place in or around the white ethno states, so that there's a compassionate approach towards people of that. I have people in my family that are biracial, and I love them, and I would die for them. And so I'm the perfect guy to represent biracial people in the new white ethno states of the future. So I elect myself as their representative in this regard. At the same time, I am fully for protecting white sovereignty. And so the white man's burden is now peaceful separation.
Nice, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think generally, if we're judging based on what it was, I think although we shouldn't have meddled in the affairs of other peoples, I think ultimately we, we help to change and transform some nations for the absolute better, and unfortunately, some others weren't able to maintain a standard that was set through lack of self-governance and things like that. But yeah, I don't think we should be apologizing, because I think we ultimately gave way much more than we took.
Yeah. Oh my
But
God.
we, I think for some lasting effects, I think I would say that we have kind of hurt ourselves as well in the long-term process by it kind of getting a bit out of hand and out of control. Especially with the mass migrations which are now taking shape, and our place in the world has actually been diminished, really, because at one point, I would say 200 years ago, we were probably 30% of the world's population, something like that. And now through cultural practices and giving up on the idea of families, and other nations kind of focusing on procreation, and it's like the mindset of boosting GDP. It's it's like, well, we are readily replaced for any cog that can be fit into the system that can replace us. So
what have conservatives conserved?
Not
enough.
In many ways, we have kind of contributed to our own demise, I think. But that said, we need to find solutions to make sure that we can be sustained in the future.
Beautifully said. I want to thank everyone in my chat on my channel for all the interesting and thoughtful comments. There's been some really intense conversation, and I can't, we'd be here for probably another 3 hours if we broke down everyone's comments, but I at least put it on the screen for, so that people watching this show can look at that and think it through. There's very valid points, and I don't disagree with a lot of people on, various topics there. I just wanted to sort of reach out and show my respect to my audience and the comments that have been adding to this. So I think this has been a phenomenal show. I guess it's a great comeback for Donald Kent and his crazy time of life here. I've got a lot on my plate right now, and I'm trying to get back to regular content. My schedule, everything's just changing in my life. So I hope that we can keep the Tuesday thing. If not, we would probably just have to switch it to another day, depending on my work schedule. But I just want to send my love to everyone out there. And, as my buddy Nulla says, we will win.
Brilliant. All right, Donald. Yeah, great to be back on a podcast stream with you again. So thanks for everyone else for tuning in, and see you next week, hopefully.
All right. God bless. Take care.
God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.